So, it says here, management system. So we're looking at the management system, but we're not going straight to the management system. We're going to look at the basics and build on that and work on that. And so I'll just click over. My mouse has got a flat battery, so I'm going to use my finger. So we did a comparison over here. We probably don't need to go through this, but just see if I've forgotten anything. Diesel and petrol engines have very similar mechanical parts, but a diesel engine, it's got a lot more strength in it, okay, because of that higher compression we talked about earlier. So you've got big ends, you've got bigger little ends, and they're just more robust, generally speaking, okay. Both engines are internally combustion engines, but they have different fuel systems, okay? So we'll talk about the fuel systems as we progress on this. With the diesel, only the air enters the cylinder during the intake. We spoke about that, of course, so that's another difference. In a diesel engine, okay, the fuel is injected into the cylinder as a fine spray near the top of the combustion stroke. With a petrol engine, the fuel is injected at the start of the intake stroke, isn't it? So there's a difference there. Ignition in a diesel occurs through the temperature for the high compression. The higher the compression, the hotter the air, and the more that can ignite. Diesel engines generally operate at low engine RPM compared to a petrol engine, but then we put turbos on them. Some diesel engines are quite powerful in some of these smaller cars, or Volkswagens and whatnot. But generally speaking, if you look at a diesel engine, normally they're not as high revving as a petrol. Diesel engines, diesel engines use distillate, which is diesel fuel, okay, whereas petrol use more of a volatile fuel, being the petrol. Diesel engines are designed to make, they're much noisier, aren't they? Why are they noisier? You ever wonder? Because of the higher compression, okay, and the way they ignite, they become noisier. But they're not as noisy as they used to be. I can remember in the old days, probably in the 80s and 90s, there were a few diesels around in those days that were quite noisy, as mostly commercial vehicles, vans and whatnot. So we know what octane is. What do you think diesel engines are measured in? No one knows? So, this is cetane. It's a measurement. Cetane is different to, whereas with a diesel, okay, the cetane rating of fuel is typically around 42 to 45, okay, while premium diesel fuel is up to 60. It's about how it combusts, right? I think, the combustion is better with a higher number, but it's about how it burns in there, whereas octane is more about, I suppose it's similar, but it is thought of.
It's 10 cents a litre cheaper to put petrol in instead of diesel.
It's a diesel car.
That doesn't exist. They're just cars. Like, what do you literally what would happen? What's going to
It's diesel. And it's cheaper. It's just a suggestion. It doesn't make a difference. It'll drive on forever. This is the end of everything.
We had a bit of a laugh, but you can't put petrol in a diesel car. What happens when we put petrol in a diesel car? Apart from having to get it towed away. What do you think it does
can damage your
piston, bearings, injector,
and diesel particulate filter if you have in the car.
Yeah. There's something that people don't realise. Diesel, being not as refined as fine as petrol, has a lubrication about it. So it lubricates all the moving parts in the injector pump and in the injectors. If we think of the common rail diesels now, they're under high pressure, extremely high pressure, and we put petrol in there, we actually do some damage to that injection system, okay? We could go as far as having to replace injectors, having to replace injector pump. That's how bad it could be. Many times when people do it, we get away with it, right? We get away with it. We take all the petrol out of the tank and we fill it back up with diesel and service and bleed it all. But there has definitely been some damage done to that fuel system, okay, because of that. So yeah, it's very important that we try not to put the wrong fuel in. Also, and we'll talk more about it, some of the cheaper diesels around the market probably aren't the best for our cars, our diesel cars. The premium diesel is probably far better in the sense that, you know, a lot of the diesels, particularly the cheaper fuel, are probably going to get more contaminants, the more designed for big heavy trucks, it doesn't matter with. But with our modern cars now, with our high pressure common rail diesels, the high pressure is going to be very abrasive if any dirt gets through the filter, and sometimes it does, and it can cause some damage to our systems. So that's another reason why I said at the beginning, don't run your fuel down too low on the diesel car for that reason. Don't go filling up your diesel if you see a petrol tanker in the petrol station filling up the tanks, because they stir up all the sediment on the bottom of the service station tanks. So I often will go past that garage and go to the next one if I see a tanker in there, whether it's petrol or diesel, but yeah, also with diesel.
And the other thing I have found out, if you go to a petrol station just next to it, like if the same petrol station has got like 20 cents price higher than the one next to it,
yes,
don't go there, because when they run low on the fuel,
that's right.
they put the price high. So that's where when you suck all those
exactly
to the bottom.
Yeah, good point. Definitely. So yeah, the fuel quality is important, and I put petrol in my diesel once. I was at a BP garage, and I knew the better quality fuel, what they call it, ultra diesel or whatever, whichever one they called it. I grabbed that one because I wanted the better diesel, put it in, and when I finished, I realised it was a premium unleaded I put in. So I didn't start it. I just
drank.
Yeah, I actually pumped most of it out with my little primer. Oh man, I worked hard to get all that fuel out.
Whoa, 20.
I tried to siphon. I was in the garage. I was in the middle of nowhere. Went to Supercheap, bought all these plastic petrol drums, siphoned it all in, and I got it all out, and then put more diesel in, and it was okay then. But yeah, fortunately I didn't start it, and that's the secret. Try not to start it with diesel, otherwise, not diesel, with petrol in it. Otherwise, that's when you do damage. Another thing too.
I don't use a mouse.
I know. Another thing too.
Is 10 cents a litre cheaper to put.
Another thing too, when you bleed those systems, it's important that you bleed them with, when you crank the engine over as little as you have to, because you've got nothing going in and you've got no lubrication in the diesel injector pump if there's no fuel in there. So try not to wind the engine, rather prime it up manually. Even have an electric pump if you've got one in your workshop to suck the fuel through, whatever. But don't let your motor wind it over and pump it up. It's better not to. Most modern cars now, you can activate the internal fuel tank fuel pump. There's a low side pressure fuel pump that will suck up the fuel for you. Bring it all up to the filter if you've changed your filter with that, with your scan tool, before you actually try and wind the engine over. Okay. So again, similar to our 4-stroke petrol engine. It looks like we've got our intake, compression, power, exhaust. That's pretty much the same, isn't it? The difference is we're only sucking air on the intake. Okay? Now we're compressing it, and the injection will start just before it goes to the power stroke. It'll happen, but then we've got our power stroke because the fuel comes in, and then we've got our exhaust stroke.
Hi, and welcome back to the C. Havoy Engineering channel. Like a gasoline engine, a diesel engine is a type of internal combustion engine. Combustion is another word for burning, and internal means inside. So an internal combustion engine is simply one where the fuel is burned inside the main part of the engine, the cylinders, where the power is produced. So, what is a 4-stroke diesel engine? The 4-stroke diesel engine is the internal combustion engine that works on thermodynamic diesel cycle, in which one power cycle consists of 4 consecutive strokes, which are suction, compression, power, and exhaust. Suction stroke starts when the piston is at the top dead center, TDC, and about to move downwards. At this time, the inlet valve is opened and the exhaust valves are closed. Suction will be created in the cylinder due to the movement of the piston downwards. Bottom dead center. The air will be drawn into the cylinder. When the piston reaches the bottom dead center, BDC, the suction stroke will end. Compression stroke starts right after the suction stroke completes, i.e. the piston reaches the BDC. During the compression stroke, the piston moves from the bottom dead center, BDC, to the top dead center, TDC. Due to this, the air which is drawn into the cylinder will be compressed. During this stroke, both the inlet and exhaust valves are closed. The air which is occupied by the cylinder is compressed into the clearance volume, which is available when the piston is at the TDC. This volume is called clearance volume. Now the fuel is injected into the cylinder by the high pressure fuel injector at the end of the compression stroke. Due to the high compression of the air in the cylinder, the pressure and temperature of the air are increased, which is sufficient to self-ignite the fuel, which is injected at the end of the compression stroke. The air is compressed to as much as 500 psi and at a compressed temperature of approximately 1000 degrees Fahrenheit or 538 degrees centigrade. During expansion stroke, both the inlet and exhaust valves remain closed. At this point, fuel is injected into the combustion chamber and is ignited by the heat of the compression. When the fuel ignites, the resulting combustion adds approximately 2600 degrees Fahrenheit or 1426 degrees centigrade for a total initial combustion temperature of approximately 3600 degrees Fahrenheit or 1982 degrees centigrade. Temperature in the combustion chamber mostly depends on the combustion ratio, which is 14:1 to as high as 25:1. The higher compression ratio of the diesel engine leads to better efficiency. So, when the fuel ignites, this begins the power stroke. The expanding force of the burning gases pushes the piston downward, providing power to the crankshaft. The diesel fuel will continue to burn through the entire power stroke. At the end of the power stroke, the exhaust valves are open to exhaust the burnt-out gases of the cylinder. During the exhaust stroke, the inlet valves will remain closed. In this stroke, the piston starts moving from the bottom dead center, BDC, to the top dead center, TDC, and sweeps all the burnt gases from the cylinder into the atmosphere. With this, the exhaust process will be completed. To conclude, in order to effectively power equipment, 4-stroke diesel engines complete and repeat the following steps: suction stroke, compression stroke, power stroke, and exhaust stroke.
Okay, notice they call it a suction stroke. I call it an intake stroke. I don't think it matters, but often in diesel circles there's slightly different terminologies used. So, and when you think about it, yeah, it's sucking all the air in, and that's all it's sucking in. And interesting diesel engine looks like. So now have a look at the two-stroke. Just like a petrol two-stroke, we have two actions of the piston for one full crank turn, okay? So you can see we've got what's called the scavenge stroke, injection stroke, compression stroke and power stroke, but only done in 2 moves. So rather than me go and explain it to you, I might just show you a video about it. How's that sound? Let's go to the next one.
In this AutoMate training video, we'll be exploring the fundamentals of 2-stroke diesel engines. This technology still plays an important role in the commercial and heavy vehicle industries, so it's vital every technician understands the key principles of the 2-stroke diesel. Here's a preview of what you can expect to see in this module. The 2-stroke design, with its excellent power to weight ratio, allows manufacturers to offer the safety and durability of a diesel engine, where normally a petrol engine would have been used. At the heart of all internal combustion engine operations is of course the stroke, which is defined as a single sweep of the cylinder by the piston up or down. A 4-stroke engine normally requires 4 conrod strokes during 2 rotations of the crankshaft to perform 4 events, being intake, compression, ignition and exhaust cycles. If you're not familiar with terms such as top dead centre, please refresh yourself with our 4-stroke fundamentals video. In contrast, diesel 2-stroke engines work in 2 strokes. Intake, compression, power and exhaust events occur in 2 strokes of the conrod and 1 full crankshaft rotation. The 2-stroke diesel engine does not mix fuel or oil with the combustion air as in a petrol 2-stroke engine. Instead, crankshaft bearings are lubricated from pressurised oil in the same way as a 4-stroke engine.
Good. So we're not going to go into 2-strokes very much other than what you've just seen, but just to be aware there are 2-stroke engines, and just move on from there, because everything that we mostly work on is 4-stroke, I think, mostly. So types of combustion chambers, so something to think about, okay? We talked about a pre-combustion chamber, okay, earlier, and there's different types of pre-combustion chambers, and there's also direct injection. That's a combustion chamber in the piston itself. See the hole in the piston? So if you have a look at some of the non-pre-combustion chamber type cylinder heads, you'll see they're very flat, and you'll see the pistons have got different shapes to take the pre-combustion, if that makes sense, okay? So we'll look at that in a minute. So looking again at the pre-combustion chamber, there's different types of pre-combustion chamber. This one here is called a swirl chamber. So as the piston's coming up, it's compressing everything. It's causing a pressure in here, and that pressure in there, as the diesel's been injected, starts to circulate and swirl. And as that happens, the heat in there will ignite the fuel slowly, and it will then slowly work its way down and expand and push the piston down until it's fully burned out. And they control the burning by doing it that way, by having that pre-combustion chamber. Again, another pre-combustion chamber. This one here is a little bit different. It's a different setup. It still works similar, but it's just shaped differently, and it doesn't have that swirling effect. But yeah, just there's different types. Notice how the piston's very flat, because all the pre-combustion chamber is done in there, not down inside the combustion chamber. This is called an air cell chamber. Again, the injector is spraying up this way now. Before it was coming down. Now it's spraying up, and all the compressed air would be gas swirling and causing the air to mix with the fuel, and that sort of a setup. So, there's just different types of designs that manufacturers use. And also notice that the pre-combustion chamber has the glow plug. We talked about a glow plug, Nick talked about a glow plug earlier. The glow plug in a pre-combustion chamber will go into the pre-combustion chamber for a good reason. Obviously, in that area is where the heat's generated, mostly for the fuel to ignite, isn't it? Because the fuel igniting is starting in here, and then it works its way back into this cylinder itself. So, and you can see how the spray is coming down there and it's circulating. So all the air's mixing with the spray. Obviously the air's there. We learned before that the air's sucked in without any fuel, and it's compressed without any fuel until it gets near the end of the compression stroke, then the fuel starts to come in. So pre-combustion chamber designs show shows a cylinder head with a pre-combustion chamber. See the cylinder head here? And there's the combustion chamber there. Pre-combustion chambers are screwed into the cylinder head, and the injector is screwed into the top of the combustion chamber. So, we're not seeing pre-combustion chambers now if they are common rail diesels, because we've got direct injection, okay? So this is prior to common rail. Most of what you'll see will be common rail for now. Why am I telling you stuff that's old? Because you need to know. You might see it. This is the piston with the area cut out, okay, for a direct injection now. The direct injection motor, you might say the top of the piston's your pre-combustion chamber now. Okay, as it comes up, all the space is taken out and all the air's compressed into this little area here at the top of the piston that's hollowed out, and then the air circulates as the diesel injector injects the fuel, as it atomizes and sprays the fuel, and it sprays it into the top of the piston, being the pre-combustion chamber now, and that's where the fuel's ignited in the diesel engine. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
You heard all that, didn't you, Brian?
Yeah.
You weren't looking at your phone, were you?
Just looking for some word.
Some words,
Yeah,
okay. What word were you trying to work out?
Looking for the donut.
Which one?
Does it have a donut shape?
Donut shape.
The what?
Last one, last sentence, donut shape.
Oh, donut shape, okay. So you know, have you ever eaten a donut?
Yeah.
So you've seen the shape of a donut? Well, that sort of resembles maybe a shape of a donut, I don't know.
Yeah, because when there's a whole piston, then it will be a donut.
That's right. So you wouldn't put a flat piston in place of a pre-combustion chamber type piston where it's been hollowed out. Otherwise you wouldn't have any combustion chamber then.
Yes.
You'd probably bend the conrod.
100.
Yeah.
What is this?
You can get these, you should be able to get this slide if you go to, when you do your assessments, there'll be the information area in your assessment area.
Diesel combustion chambers come in two main types: direct and indirect injection. Both are designed to promote turbulence, to help the compressed air and injected fuel mix well. Engines using direct injection have cylinder heads with a flat face. The combustion chamber is formed in the top of the piston. Sometimes the rim of the piston provides squish, forcing the air to the centre of the combustion chamber. This causes turbulence as fuel is injected into the cylinder. In indirect injection, the piston is fairly flat or has a shallow cavity. The main combustion chamber is between the cylinder head and the top of the piston, but a smaller separate chamber is in the head. Fuel is injected into this smaller chamber. It can have various designs. This is a swirl chamber. It's spherical and connected to the main chamber by an angled passage. Both the injector and glow plug are screwed into the head. The glow plug preheats the air inside to help start the engine. During compression, the spherical shape makes the air swirl in the chamber. This helps make a better mixture of the air and fuel, which improves combustion. This combustion chamber is divided into a main combustion chamber and an air cell joined by a throat. The injector is in the throat. When injection commences, combustion pressure forces the air to flow from the air cell, where it mixes with fuel from the injector. The rush of air from the air cell produces a rotary motion of gas in the main chamber, which helps make combustion more efficient. This pre-combustion chamber is screwed into the cylinder head. The injector is mounted in the upper end. Injection occurs near the top of the compression stroke. Only part of the fuel is burned in the pre-combustion chamber because of the limited amount of air there. The high rise in pressure forces burning fuel into the main chamber. This happens very rapidly, which helps make more efficient combustion.
Okay, so I probably didn't need to explain all those chambers because it's well explained on that video. It gives you a better idea, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about glow plugs. We talked about glow plugs, about heating the fuel for easy starting. Do you think we need glow plugs in a diesel engine to make the engine start?
Yes.
Nowadays, no. The latest ones, if it's not that cold now.
In our climate, we probably don't so much, although I think with the pre-combustion chamber type, like earlier diesels, they were more prominent. But you know, glow plugs are not only there for the ease of starting, they're there for other reasons as well.
Ignite, pre-ignition, or?
They're there to keep the temperature warm when the car first starts. They also, I believe, they help too with, heating up, when you have your DPF go off, they help keep that happening. And even with the EGR happening, the EGR, I think the glow plugs are used for a number of reasons, more than just, so for pollution reasons, more than just for starting reasons, okay? But also, in the early days, we didn't have to have a glow plug. We could also have a heater like that. As the air passed through on the intake manifold, the air would suck through that radiator, which heats up electrically, and that heated up the air, and that was enough too to do what the glow plug does. So I've seen that in some of the bigger diesel engines.
Is this something that's what called diesel heater?
Yeah, that's why I mentioned that, because those SL engines used to have one of those to preheat the air going into the motor.
Because I remember I took out one out of my Land Rover.
Yes.
Like there was a button which you're going to switch on, and it's gonna smoke under the car.
I know about that.
Yeah, it smoked under the Land Rover, and then I checked, and it said it's a diesel preheater or something. That's what.
Oh, might be then.
That's what they said.
Might have had a bit of oil on it because of the breathing of the engine, so mine might have got
Oh
oil.
no, that's what they said. When it heats up, it's going to produce a tiny bit of smoke, and it's going to blow a tiny bit of smoke under the car.
Okay, could be, yeah.
Liquid.
Alright, these glow plugs, they can often break inside the sun there. You're going to pull the head off. Not a nice thing to have happen.
I've got one at work now.
Sorry?
Yes, sir.
You've had that happen?
No.
Yeah, I've got one at work.
Yes.
Glow plug.
Break. Yeah.
Right.
Spark plugs can break into sun heads as well. Have you had that?
Wait.
Yes?
Can we call that one is a heater plus?
This is a glow plug that heats up. It heats up on the end there.
Yeah, I mean, can we call it heater plus?
Can we what?
Can we call heater plug?
I don't call it a heater plug, but that's what it does. I call it a glow plug. But a heater plug is probably a good name for it, but it's not what we call it, that's all.
Yeah.
Alright. So, with the glow plug, okay, it's a whole circuit. It's a whole circuit of electrical. Obviously, a lot of the common rails will be computer controlled, but in the older vehicles before computers, it would have a preheater timer. They call it an ECU, but it's a timer.
On the key.
And when you turn your key on, okay, this preheater, and you got your light that indicate that the glow plug's actually happening,
Yes, sir.
It's a yellow light, and it will actually turn the relay on for the glow plug, for the glow plugs to work by time. It's also probably hooked up to I can't see it here, but I'm nearly sure that there'll be some things like your coolant temperature sensor feeding into things so that, it would adjust it on polar climates.
Probably the latest cars now.
Maybe. But there's a certain amount of resistance in those glow plugs, right? And sometimes glow plugs, they can either open circuit or they can get higher resistance than what they should do.
Yes, sir.
And when you know what the resistance is and you work out your resistance overall, you can actually test somewhere here, you can test the resistance, and you should expect to see, if you've done your maths, the resistance. I think in Cert 3 we did a bit of that, didn't we? I can't remember what they did in Cert 3, but yeah. So you can tell, because sometimes it's not easy to get to those glow plugs. And if, say, you had everything working up to here, but you weren't having a starting problem, probably a resistance test would be wise to do and just work out whether there's a problem.
Just a quick question. If I take a resistance from G, like where the G is, like from the point G, while all four is connected.
Yes.
So am I going to get the reading for individuals on the G or all four?
You'll get all four, and you have to do your maths with four resistors.
Or divide?
Yeah, divide them up. So you have to know the resistance. Sometimes you don't know the resistance, but you get an idea, And you might have one resistor. You might have one resistor that's an open circuit, but you're getting resistance between those two because you've done your math. You've got something wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. So looking at the combustion of the fuel, right? And these are the different degrees of your crank rotation as the fuel starts. So if we look here, A to B is a delay period. So from there to there is probably when the air's been compressed and the injector just starts to inject, right? And there's a bit of a delay. Then from B to C is the burn time. See the burn time? And then we get up to top the centre, and then we come down to our power stroke. And so B to C is the phase of rapid burning, B to C. C to D is the phase of controlled burning. C to D, that's where it's controlled. And then we have a downward stroke of the power stroke, okay? Turbos, we use turbos, don't we? We talk about turbos. Nearly every diesel now that's in a smaller light vehicle will have a turbo. Obviously diesels, as I said earlier, often lower RPM engines, and we need some higher RPM sometimes to get off the mark sometimes. So they use obviously a turbocharger to force more air into the cylinder. Obviously, the more air we get into the cylinder, okay, the better our combustion will be and the more fuel we can deliver at that time, okay? So the turbo and blowers force air into the cylinders. This provides a greater mass of air than if only atmospheric pressure was used. The greater mass of air provides more oxygen for combustion, enabling more fuel to be burned in the combustion chamber. The result is an increase in volumetric efficiency and a higher power output from that engine. So yeah, we see that in petrol engines too. And here's an exploded view of an engine. Okay, the cutaway view of a 3-cylinder diesel. Have you seen a 3-cylinder diesel?
No, sir.
Not very often I see them, but I think they're around. Shows internal, external parts, including the turbocharger. So here's our turbo here. And looking at this part of the engine, see a bit more of the turbo. There's our turbine, the wheel. Yeah. Who can remember, who was in my class when we were at the old shop and we had that turbo that we blew air into it? You there?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
They spit up good, aren't they?
Yes.
We're not supposed to do that, are we?
No, it's very wrong.
Okay. So most diesels will have an oil cooler.
What's that, sir?
Most
Oil
diesel
cooler.
engines have an oil cooler.
Yeah.
The diesel engine being a higher compression engine, generating more heat, probably the oil will deteriorate a lot quicker if we didn't have an oil cooler. Okay. Sometimes these oil coolers are cooled by, and this one would be by cooling. So sometimes if we get oil in our coolant system, the good suspicious could be that oil cooler.
Yeah, that's what problem I had.
You had that problem?
I fixed it now.
You fixed it? Good, good. But yeah, so that can be problematic. Sometimes even the seals, sometimes they have seals, rubber seals, in the way they design them. And when those seals leak, it can leak into the coolant system. So it might not even be the cooler, but often it is. How can we test the cooler to see if it's a cooler leaking?
Pressure test.
Pressure test, but pressure test, I'm just thinking now, if we pressure test, we're talking about the cooling system.
No, just on that, you block both holes on that cooler. Like you have to take out the thing and put a little bit of pressure and put it in the water and see if it bubbles.
Good answer. Yeah. Is there any way we could do it in the car?
So, what do you do?
I think if we have water in the coolant system and we suspect it's coolant, could we bypass that to try it?
Yes.
We probably could. I'm just thinking.
We could, but still I'm
thinking,
worried about the oil.
I always think about a time-consuming job. If it's a really time-consuming job to pull that cooler out, and it could be, we have to start to think logically. How can we prove that it's a cooler and not a head gasket or something else? So there's probably a couple of ways. We might be able to bypass that temporarily, clean out all the oil out of the radiator.
Yeah.
Or we might be able to put our pressure tester in the coolant. If it's a decent sized leak, we'll see the gauge dropping, won't we?
Right.
Then we could then we could bypass that and put the gauge back on and make sure it didn't drop, you know. There could be ways of doing it. But I'm just here to give you ideas of how I think when I get a job that's involving a lot of labour. If the labour was very easy to pull that out and we could test it the way you said, Alvin, that's great. Yeah, why not? Might be quicker. Always look for the quickest way.
There's another product in the market I've seen. It's like a glowing dark dye.
Yes.
So which you put in the coolant, and then wherever your coolant like sips out, so it's gonna leave that glowing dark like residue on that.
All right.
So you have to get the kind of dark and just have a look.
Again, you'd have to pull the oil cooler off to see that possibly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it depends how hard it is to pull the oil cooler off, I guess. But yeah, I always go for the oil cooler before I go for a head gasket when I get water in the cooling system, if there is an oil cooler. Oh, nearly forgot. Who knows what these things are?
Oil thrower.
Sorry?
Oil thrower?
Yeah.
It sits in the motor beside the piston.
And what's the idea of it?
It throws the oil to cool to lubricate the piston.
Yeah, exactly. So it throws it up on the cylinder wall. And that's what it's for. So diesels are very much, I see them in diesels. I don't say they're not in petrol engines, but I don't see them as much.
In diesel,
definitely.
That one looks like a retainer line on the injectors.
This one?
The connectors.
Yeah, if you look at it upside down, they come up and they've got a little spout that goes up like that. Yeah. All right. So, the valve arrangement on diesels can vary. Most diesels now are overhead cam, as most cars are, most engines are. Sometimes you can adjust the tappet on them. On my highlights, I'm pretty sure I know the earlier one was, there was a bucket shim adjustment that you have to check and then buy the different thickness shims. And then for the camshaft lobe is right on top of the, I suppose, the cover that goes over the valve spring and the valve, and it rides on that and pushes it down, so less parts that wear. This you've got more parts to wear, I guess, with the rocker actually moving. But yeah, there's different setups on the valves. And valve clearances are important. You know, we often forget to do valve clearances, or don't do them, but we need to. Why don't we do valve clearances very often on a diesel? Or why don't a lot of shops do it?
Valve clearance?
It's normally a pretty big job to pull the rocker cover off, because you got often you've got your injectors going through the rocker cover. You got supposedly renew the pipes every time you take the injectors out. It's not a 5-minute job. And a lot of workshops think, and even workshop OEM workshop service guides tell you, do a listen test for the tappets. If they're not noisy, leave them. But that doesn't account for if the tappets get tight. And often when the valves wear, they're going to tighten up, more likely to tighten up than loosen. So we really should be doing a valve clearance test. Otherwise, yeah, we don't know if we're a tight valve, do we? Actually, who was at AA when they were doing that? Brendan Skidler was doing a presentation on the pressure waveforms, and he could tell if the valve clearances were wrong through the waveform. Any of you? You were there, Brian? Did you go to the AA? AURETR124.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, did you go? Yeah, did you remember that talk about the valve clearance? How on the waveform, because he put a transducer in the motor and ran the motor and got a picture of the compression rate, and if the valve clearances were too tight, he could tell by the position of the waveform. Pretty neat, eh?
Yeah.
That would be a good answer to check if your valve clearances were right. They haven't pulled everything apart.
Up a couple of viewer questions on diesel. Bit of physics in the beer garden for you blue singlet wearers. You know who you are. let's get straight to it.
I may be a bit behind the times diesel technology-wise, but I think diesels pretty much always ran lean, as there's no obstruction or butterfly valve in the intake side of things. This would mean diesel engines always run lean unless you're working the engine hard, in which case you're close to max fuel delivery and thus close to stoichiometry. So there should always be the extra oxygen for the DPF to do its regen voodoo when the engine's under low load. Please correct me if I'm wrong or just out of date.
Okie dokie. Yeah, definitely wrong. ×2. So at least you are consistent. Well done there. A lot of people suggested this about leanness and wide openness, so let us talk about that, shall we? In theory, okay, diesels do not need throttles because performance is regulated by the delivery of fuel, and they run wide open, as it were, on air. More fuel, more performance, okay? Less fuel, less performance. That's how this works. The air intake, unrestricted. That's diesel in theory, okay? Pretty different to petrol, which is throttled on air, and that's how this works. And in practice, that's how it works for many diesel engines. But quite a few modern diesels also actually have throttles that are ECU controlled. So sort of throttle by wire, by computer, if you like. And what that throttle does is make it easier to manage the exhaust gas recirculation system. So if you introduce a vacuum into the inlet air plumbing by closing the throttle on one of those modern diesels, that makes it kind of easier to introduce the volume of EGR that the engine needs. Less competition for the flow, right? It's just easier. And I know there's going to be a bunch of dickheads in the comments, you know, saying, what a bad thing EGR is, just delete that, mate, it's shit. That kind of thing. If that's you, if you want everyone to know what a muppet you are, just go right ahead, knock yourself out, hey. It's a free country. #Australia. EGR, in fact, makes engines more efficient and it reduces emissions. So EGR is a good thing on balance, provided the engineers and R&D do their jobs properly. And I guess also removing it is illegal. So there's that. And the fines, if you get caught, are monumental. This notion, okay, that no throttle equals always running lean, that is frankly insane, even though I get the thought process that leads people there. Unrestricted air, well, it must be lean. I don't know.
There's a few things wrong there. I purposely played that. It is a bit of a character, of course. Diesels, we don't use the word lean for a start, so that was wrong. But why I played that was, he made some good points I want to bring up. Okay, how do we control the RPM on the diesel?
It's by adding fuel.
Adding fuel, yeah. Not by
adding and subtracting fuel.
Not by shutting the airflow, is it? No. So a diesel has full airflow going through, okay? That's why there's no vacuum in the intake manifold of a diesel. Brian, do you remember me teaching you about vacuum once?
Yep.
Remember I told you we blow up a balloon?
Yeah.
And then if we restrict the balloon from only letting a little bit of air come out, okay, we only lose a little bit of pressure, but if we open it right up, we lose all the pressure. Well, it's a bit like that with vacuum, isn't it? If we close the manifold so there's no air coming in, we get a lot of pressure difference between outside and inside. But with the diesel, the valve, there is a valve on some of the modern diesel motors, and I'll talk about that soon, but generally speaking, the valve stays open, okay? Or in the earlier diesels, there were no valves. It was just air coming through, okay? That's why it's so dangerous. If a diesel gets a gut full of oil into the combustion chamber, it will run on and on and on because it's got a full flow of air. It's got heaps of fuel in there. The oil will burn like a diesel will burn. And that's what happened with that motor I told you, it roared up. It roared up because, I didn't tell you, in the shipping container, I think the motor laid over and the oil went into the intake system, then got put up and they started it and it was running on the oil that was in the engine. So even when we disconnected the fuel, it was still running on. So it had full air coming in. The reason the later model cars have a valve, right, is for two reasons. One is it can shut off the air if the car does run on. I think Nick said that the newer cars probably won't run on like the older diesels do or did, because they can shut off that air coming through. If they shut off the air, doesn't matter how much fuel you put in, if there's no air, there's no combustion, okay? So that's one reason. But the other reason is for the EGR. When the EGR is happening, like he said on that video, when it closes and EGR opens, it gets more EGR in and not so much air coming in, okay? So they have that valve in there, which is fly-by-wire, but he called it a throttle valve, but it's not throttle. It's got nothing to do with throttle. So it's got everything to do with emissions and the cut off the engine. So it's more of a cut off, okay? What else did he say in that video? He talked about someone saying because that there's all this air flowing in, he used the word lean, but I'm going to use the word, it was under-fueling. And that's nonsense, because it always has lots of air coming through. So obviously people think petrol, they don't think diesel, so they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, because like with cable, we try to push as much as air.
We do, that's right.
We want to push in, yeah.
That's right. The other thing too, he talked about how we don't delete EGRs. Who believes that?
I want to delete.
No. Does anyone think differently?
We could delete it.
You could delete it. Wrong answer. We shouldn't delete it, it's the right answer. But we shouldn't. EGRs do more than what we realise, okay? A lot of people think they're bad things. But you know what? Our job should be to maintain those things, you know, stop them from getting bad, gives us employment. There are a lot of people out there now that are deleting EGR valves, deleting DPFs, right? They're not only messing up our environment that we're trying to help, you know, they're not only doing that, they're also breaking the law, but they're also putting a little bit of unbalance in the engine, because the engine software, it uses more fuel, okay, when certain things happen. For example, when EGR is happening, it will take away fuel while EGR is happening because there's not as much oxygen to burn. But when EGR is not happening, it'll put more fuel in, so we upset that balance possibly. DPFs, it could still overfuel, because even though the DPF's been deleted and the software has been tricked up to think it's deleted, the computer still might want to put more fuel in when it's supposed to do a regen when it's not supposed to, and cause a lot of problems. EGR actually cools down combustion, okay, it helps with the NOx of course, but some of these engines are designed to run at a certain temperature, and what happens if we take away the inert gases going back in through EGR, the combustion chamber gets hotter, we could detonate the fuel that's been burnt because of the extra heat and blow a hole in the piston. Some engines that's actually happened. So don't delete EGR, it's not a good idea, okay, even though people do it. All right. Okay. So, quiz time. See how good you are. Describe the operational difference between a diesel engine and a petrol engine. Who'd like to have a go at that? Brian?
Yes.
What's the difference?
So
Just a minute, Brian.
with the petrol engine,
Yes.
it's a fuels and air coming to the intake.
Yes.
But the diesel engine is only air coming the intake, and the fuels goes in. Go after the air intake.
Yes.
Right?
So you're saying that during the intake stroke, only air is coming in, whereas on a petrol engine, on the intake stroke, air and fuel's coming in. That's correct, yes. So when does the diesel fuel actually come into the cylinder, do you know?
It's come after the air coming to the intake.
After the air comes in, and on the compression stroke as it's compressing, does it near the top of compression. That's right. Good answer. Good answer. All right, next question. Describe the components of a typical diesel engine and their features, functions and operations. So, from what we've learned today, who would like to explain that? Would you like finish? No? Or maybe you, Abby?
No, after finish.
You don't have to say everything. Yes,
Yeah,
something.
just a little bit.
Direct injection.
Yeah.
All right, Shusha, your turn.
In diesel engine there has a direct injection system.
Yes.
It's on top of the it sprays on top of the piston.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's if it's a common rail.
Common
is
rail.
it? Yeah. So there are other types of injections that aren't common rail that actually use what? What do they use?
Chamber combustion chamber.
Pre-combustion chamber. That's correct. Yes. Okay. Good work. So next question. Describe the four. So I missed four out. Describe the four phases of a combustion engine.
So it's intake.
Just a minute. Wait. Yes.
Intake.
Yes.
Compression.
Yes.
Power.
Yes.
And exhaust.
Yes. Pretty much the same as a four-stroke petrol engine, isn't it? Except the way it's done is a little bit different, and we just explained that before. Was it Shushan or you? Okay. Oh yeah, it was you, Brian. All right. Must be Abby's turn. Your turn. Okay. List. We haven't talked about this.
Yes, that's
List the
right.
byproducts of diesel engine combustion.
List the byproducts of diesel engine combustion. Byproducts.
Well, after combustion, what comes out of the exhaust pipe?
Carbon.
Bob, what'd you say?
Carbon.
Carbon. Carbon dioxide probably comes out.
Carbon
Yes.
monoxide.
Carbon monoxide.
NOx.
NOx. Possibly there's a lot of soot matter that comes out.
Soot.
Particles.
Oh yeah.
Soot.
Water vapor.
Water vapor, yeah. And there's probably other byproducts. We'll talk a bit more about that down the track.
Yes.
Identify and explain the functions of a turbocharger.
Turbochargers.
Yes.
They push in more air
Yes.
into the intake system.
Very right. Correct. And what's that do?
Gives more horsepower.
Yes.
Boost the performance.
And there's a word I'm looking for too.
More torque.
It gives more volume.
Velocity.
No.
No velocity. How?
Volumetric efficiency is the word I was looking for, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any questions, class? We all happy?
Happy.
Happy, happy, happy?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll turn this off.